On my 70th birthday, I sat alone in my small apartment. No cake, no guests. Then a delivery arrived from my daughter's husband, a beautifully wrapped gift box. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph that made my blood run cold. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Anderson, and I turned 70 years old on a Tuesday in October. For most of my life, people knew me as the woman with the warm smile who never complained, no matter how hard things got. I was the mother who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. The neighbor who always had fresh cookies ready for the children on the block. The church volunteer who never missed a Sunday service. But beneath that gentle exterior was a woman who had survived more than most people could imagine. A woman whose strength had been tested in ways that left invisible scars on my heart. I raised my daughter Sarah completely alone after my husband died in a construction accident when she was only 5 years old. One day he kissed us goodbye and went to work. He never came home. In a single moment, I became a widow at 35, left with a traumatized little girl and a mountain of debt I didn't know existed. There was no time to grieve properly. I had to survive. I had to make sure Sarah survived. So I worked. God, how I worked. I cleaned office buildings from midnight to 6 in the morning, came home to get Sarah ready for school, then waitressed at a diner from 9 to 5. I survived on 3 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like regret. Every single decision I made for the next 18 years revolved around one question. What does Sarah need? New shoes for school? I wore mine until the soles had holes. Class trip to the science museum? I skipped meals for a week to afford it. College application fees? I sold my wedding ring, the last piece of my husband I had left. I never bought myself new clothes. I never went to the salon. I never took a vacation. The word luxury wasn't in my vocabulary. My entire existence became about building a bridge from our poverty to her future, even if I had to use my own back as the foundation. But I didn't mind. Truly, I didn't. Because Sarah was extraordinary. She was brilliant and kind and full of dreams that sparkled in her eyes when she talked about the future. She graduated top of her class, earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, and became a successful marketing executive. Watching her walk across that graduation stage in her cap and gown, I cried tears of pure joy. Every sacrifice had been worth it. My baby girl had made it. She'd escaped the cycle of poverty that had trapped me. For years after, we were inseparable. She visited every Sunday without fail. We'd sit in my tiny kitchen, and I'd make her favorite pancakes while she told me about her exciting life in the corporate world. She'd bring me flowers, help with my groceries, and hold my hand while we watched old movies on my worn-out couch. She called me her hero, her best friend, her everything. Those were the happiest years of my life. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by photographs of Sarah from every stage of her life. My walls told the story of us, a mother and daughter who had survived the worst and built something beautiful together. I didn't have much money in the bank. I didn't own a house or a car worth bragging about, but I had something more valuable than wealth. I had my daughter's love, or at least I thought I did. For years, my life had a rhythm as comforting and predictable as a heartbeat. I'd wake up every morning at 6, make myself a simple breakfast of toast and tea, and sit by my kitchen window watching the neighborhood come alive. Mrs. Chen from next door would wave as she left for her morning walk. The young couple in apartment 3B would rush out with their twin toddlers. And I'd smile, feeling grateful for another day, another chance to see my daughter on Sunday. Those Sunday brunches were sacred to me. Sarah had her own key to my apartment, and she'd let herself in around 10, always calling out, "Mom, I'm here," in that sing-song voice that filled my small home with light. I'd already have the pancake batter ready, the same recipe I'd perfected over 25 years, the one with just a hint of vanilla and cinnamon that she loved. We'd cook together, laughing as flour somehow always ended up on our clothes. She'd tell me about her work projects, the difficult clients, the office politics, and I'd listen with complete attention, so proud of how articulate and confident she'd become. After brunch, we had our routine. She'd insist on doing the dishes while I dried and put them away. Then we'd walk to the corner grocery store, her arm linked through mine, and she'd push the cart while I selected vegetables and compare prices out of habit. Sarah would always sneak expensive items into the cart when she thought I wasn't looking. Fancy cheeses, imported crackers, the good coffee, and pretend not to notice when I protested. "Mom, let me spoil you a little," she'd say with that beautiful smile. "You deserve it." Back at my apartment, we'd settle onto my old floral couch, the one I'd had since she was a teenager, with its faded cushions and the small burn mark from when she'd accidentally dropped a curling iron during prom preparations. We'd watch classic movies, Casablanca, It's a Wonderful Life, The Sound of Music, films we'd seen together dozens of times but never tired of. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder, just like when she was little, and I'd stroke her hair and feel a contentment so complete it made my chest ache with gratitude. My weekdays had their own gentle structure. Mondays and Wednesdays, I volunteered at St. Mary's Church, helping sort donations for families in need. It felt good to give back, remembering when I'd been on the receiving end of that charity. Tuesdays, I had a standing appointment with Mrs. Chen for afternoon tea. We'd sit on her balcony drinking jasmine tea from delicate cups and talk about everything and nothing. Our grown children, neighborhood gossip, memories of our younger days. Thursday mornings, I tended to my small balcony garden, coaxing tomatoes and herbs to grow in mismatched pots I'd collected over the years. I talked to my plants like old friends, updating them on Sarah's accomplishments. Evenings were for knitting. I made blankets for the homeless shelter, scarves for the church's winter drive, and small stuffed animals for the children's hospital. My hands were never idle. I'd learned long ago that keeping busy kept the loneliness at bay. But it wasn't really loneliness. Not then. It was peaceful solitude. Because I knew that come Sunday, my apartment would fill with Sarah's laughter again. Every night before bed, I'd stand in front of my wall of photographs. Sarah's school pictures from kindergarten through high school, each year showing her growing more beautiful and confident. Her prom photo in that blue dress we'd found on sale. Her college graduation, both of us beaming with pride. Candid shots of us at the park, at the beach during one precious vacation we'd managed, making silly faces at the camera. I'd touch each frame gently and whisper, "Thank you, God, for giving me such a wonderful daughter." My apartment was small, just one bedroom, a cramped kitchen, a living room barely big enough for a couch and television. The carpet was worn, the appliances outdated, the walls in need of fresh paint I couldn't afford. But to me, it was a palace, because it was filled with love and memories. The refrigerator held Sarah's childhood drawings, yellowed with age, but still displayed with pride. The bookshelf contained every card she'd ever given me, organized chronologically in a special box. My bedroom nightstand held a framed photo of the three of us, me, Sarah, and her father, taken just weeks before he died, our last picture as a complete family. I didn't need wealth or luxury. I had everything that mattered. I had a daughter who loved me, who showed up every week without fail, who made me feel valued and needed and cherished. I was a mother who had succeeded at the most important job in the world. My sacrifices had paid off. My daughter was thriving, and she hadn't forgotten me. That was enough. That was everything. Looking back now, those simple, predictable days were the happiest of my life, and I didn't even fully appreciate them while I had them. I should have known that nothing that perfect could last forever. It started 3 years ago on a beautiful spring evening, so subtly that I almost missed it entirely. Sarah called me, her voice bubbling with excitement in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "Mom, I have incredible news. I met someone." My heart swelled with joy. My daughter, my beautiful, successful daughter, had found love. She told me about Marcus Sterling, a businessman who owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. They'd met at a corporate networking event, and apparently it had been love at first sight. "He's amazing, Mom." Sophisticated, successful, and he treats me like a queen," she gushed. I was thrilled for her. Truly, after years of failed relationships and heartbreak, Sarah deserved happiness. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Everything moved so fast it made my head spin. The proposal happened at some exclusive resort in the Bahamas. The ring, she told me breathlessly over the phone, was a 4-carat diamond that cost more than I'd earned in 5 years of work. I swallowed the small knot in my throat and told her how happy I was for her. Because I was. I pushed away the tiny voice that whispered, "That's moving awfully fast, isn't it?" The engagement party was my first real glimpse into Sarah's new world, and it left me feeling unsettled in ways I couldn't quite articulate. It was held at an exclusive country club I'd only seen in magazines, the kind of place with manicured golf courses, crystal chandeliers, and valet parking. I'd borrowed a dress from Mrs. Chen and taken 2 buses to get there because parking cost $40, and I couldn't justify that expense. When I walked into the grand ballroom, I felt immediately out of place. Everyone was dressed in designer clothes, holding champagne glasses, speaking in that casual way wealthy people do about vacation homes and investment portfolios. Sarah spotted me and waved, rushing over with Marcus beside her. He was handsome in that polished, expensive way. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mom, you made it." Sarah hugged me quickly, almost perfunctorily, then turned to Marcus. "Marcus, this is my mother, Margaret." I extended my hand warmly. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Sarah's told me so much about you." He shook my hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Margaret." Not Mrs. Anderson, just Margaret, as if we were colleagues, not family. Then Sarah did something that made my stomach tighten. She glanced around the room, leaned in, and whispered, "Mom, let me introduce you to Marcus's parents quickly, and then I really need to mingle with some important people. You understand, right?" Important people? Weren't I important? But I smiled and nodded, not wanting to make a scene. She walked me over to an elegant, older couple. Marcus's parents, Helen and Richard Sterling. They looked at me with polite but distant smiles, the kind you give to service staff. "How lovely to meet you," Helen said in a tone that suggested it wasn't lovely at all. "Sarah's told us you did an admirable job raising her in difficult circumstances." Difficult circumstances, as if my entire life could be summarized so clinically. The introduction lasted, maybe 90 seconds before Sarah excused herself, leaving me standing awkwardly with a couple who clearly had no interest in continuing the conversation. They nodded politely and drifted away toward a group of people in expensive jewelry. I stood alone by the champagne fountain, clutching my borrowed purse, watching Sarah work the room. She was laughing with a group of elegantly dressed women, her hand resting on Marcus's arm, looking completely at home in this world of wealth and privilege. I tried to catch her eye several times throughout the evening, but she seemed intentionally busy, always deep in conversation with someone important. At one point, I approached her to say goodnight. It was getting late, and I had a long bus ride home. "Mom, not now," she said without looking at me, her voice tight. "I'm talking to Marcus's business partners. This is important." She gestured vaguely toward the bar. "There's food over there if you're hungry." I left without saying goodbye to anyone. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window at the dark streets and tried to understand the uncomfortable feeling settling in my chest. Sarah had been busy, that's all. She was nervous, trying to make a good impression on Marcus's family and friends. It was natural. It didn't mean anything. But my hands were shaking as I unlocked my apartment door, and I couldn't quite convince myself that everything was fine. Something had felt wrong in that room. The way Sarah had introduced me so quickly, almost apologetically. The way she'd whispered about important people, as if I wasn't one of them. The way Marcus's parents had looked at me, not with warmth or curiosity about their future daughter-in-law's mother, but with something closer to pity mixed with disdain. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, looking at the photos of Sarah on my refrigerator. "She's just stressed about the wedding," I said aloud to the empty room. "She's entering a new world and trying to fit in. It doesn't mean she's ashamed of me." But even as I said the words, I didn't quite believe them. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the evening over and over, trying to pinpoint exactly when my daughter had started looking at me like I was an inconvenience rather than her mother. I spent the following weeks convincing myself that I was overreacting, that my insecurities were creating problems that didn't exist. Every time doubt crept into my mind, I pushed it away with explanations that seemed reasonable in the moment. Sarah was simply overwhelmed with wedding preparations. Planning a wedding was stressful, especially one as elaborate as hers was shaping up to be. Of course, she didn't have as much time for our Sunday brunches. Of course, she seemed distracted during our phone calls. She had a million details to coordinate, a new family to impress, a future to build. I was being selfish, expecting her to prioritize me when she had so much on her plate. When she canceled our first Sunday brunch, I told myself it was fine. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but Marcus's mother wants to go dress shopping with me today," she'd said over the phone, sounding genuinely apologetic. "Rain check." I'd smiled even though she couldn't see me. "Of course, sweetheart, that sounds lovely. You go bond with your future mother-in-law." I made the pancakes anyway that morning, out of habit, then ate them alone while staring at her empty chair across from my small kitchen table. The apartment felt too quiet without her laughter filling it. The second cancellation came the following week. "Mom, Marcus surprised me with a weekend trip to wine country. We're leaving Friday night. I know it's our Sunday, but this is important for us as a couple." I swallowed my disappointment. "That's wonderful, honey. You two deserve some romantic time together. We can catch up next week." But next week, she had a bridal shower. The week after that, cake tasting. Then venue finalizing, then meetings with the wedding planner. Each cancellation came with a valid reason, and each time I accepted it with a smile in my voice, even as my heart sank a little lower. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, noticed something was off. One Sunday morning, she knocked on my door and found me setting the table for two, even though Sarah had canceled the night before. "Margaret, is everything okay with you and Sarah?" she asked gently, her kind eyes filled with concern. I immediately brightened my expression, waving away her worry. "Oh yes, everything's wonderful. She's just so busy with wedding planning. You know how it is. It's such an exciting but hectic time. I'm so proud of her." Mrs. Chen didn't look convinced, but she nodded and changed the subject. I started making excuses to everyone, including myself. When my phone would ring and Sarah's name would appear, my heart would leap with hope, only to sink when the calls became shorter and more transactional. "Hi, Mom, can't talk long, just calling to update you on the seating chart. I put you at table 12 with some of Marcus's distant relatives. Okay? Great. Love you. Bye." Click. 5 years ago, we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. Now I was lucky to get 5 minutes of her divided attention. My birthday came that year, my 67th. Sarah had never, not once in her entire life, forgotten my birthday. We always celebrated together, usually just the two of us with a homemade cake and whatever small gift she could afford. It was never about the presents. It was about the time together, the acknowledgement that this day mattered because I mattered to her. But that year, my birthday came and went in silence. No call, no text, no card. I sat by my phone all day making excuses each hour that passed. She's probably planning a surprise. She's probably just running late. She probably got busy and will call tonight. By evening, I couldn't deny it anymore. She'd forgotten. For the first time in 42 years of being her mother, I'd become forgettable. I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over her contact, wanting desperately to call her. But pride and fear stopped me. What if she'd remembered and just chosen not to reach out? What if calling her made me seem needy, clingy, like the difficult mother Marcus's parents had implied I was? So I didn't call. Instead, I went to bed early, pulled the covers over my head, and cried silently into my pillow. The next morning, a text arrived. OMG, Mom, I'm so sorry. Yesterday was crazy busy with wedding stuff and it completely slipped my mind. Forgive me? We'll celebrate soon, I promise. I typed back immediately. Of course, sweetheart, don't worry about it. You have so much going on. I love you. 3 hours later, she responded with a heart emoji. Just that, nothing more. I showed the text exchange to Mrs. Chen, pointing at the heart emoji like it was evidence that everything was fine. See? She just forgot because she's busy. It happens. She still loves me. Mrs. Chen squeezed my hand but said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes I wasn't ready to hear. That night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing my smile, making sure it looked genuine. She's just busy, I told my reflection firmly. Stop being so needy. Stop making everything about you. She's building a new life and you should be happy for her, not sulking because she doesn't have time for weekly visits anymore. I grabbed one of Sarah's childhood photos from my living room, her at age 10, gap-toothed and grinning, her arms wrapped around my neck. I held it close and whispered, "You still love me, don't you? This is just temporary. Once the wedding is over, things will go back to normal. You'll come back to me." I kissed the photo and placed it back on the shelf, right next to the phone that no longer rang every Sunday morning. Denial became my armor, protecting me from a truth I wasn't ready to face. Every missed call, every canceled visit, every shortened conversation, I wrapped them all in reasonable explanations and tucked them away where they couldn't hurt me. I convinced myself that love doesn't disappear overnight, that the bond between a mother and daughter who'd survived so much together couldn't be broken by something as simple as a wedding and a wealthy fiancé. But deep down, in a place I refused to acknowledge, I knew. I knew something fundamental had shifted. I knew my daughter was slipping away from me. I just wasn't brave enough yet to admit it. The wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in June, and with it came the undeniable proof that I'd been lying to myself for months. The ceremony was held at Marcus's family estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens, a mansion that looked like something from a European castle, and enough land that you couldn't see the neighbors. 300 guests were invited to witness what the embossed invitation called the union of two souls and two families. I'd saved for months to buy a proper dress, a soft lavender one from a department store that I thought looked elegant and mother of the bride appropriate. I had it altered to fit perfectly, spent money I didn't have on new shoes, and even got my hair styled at a salon for the first time in years. I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. A young woman with a clipboard met me at the entrance to the ceremony space, rows of white chairs arranged before a flower-covered arch overlooking a lake. "Name, please?" she asked efficiently. "Margaret Anderson. I'm the mother of the bride." I said it with such pride, expecting her face to light up with recognition. Instead, she frowned at her clipboard, running her finger down a list. "Anderson. Anderson, oh, here you are. You're in Section C, Row 12, Seat 23. My smile faltered. "I'm sorry, Section C? Isn't the mother of the bride supposed to sit in the front row?" She looked uncomfortable. "I just handle seating assignments, ma'am. Your name is listed here." She pointed to a spot near the back, behind what seemed like dozens of other guests. I felt my face flush hot with humiliation. There must be a mistake. Can you check with Sarah? She's the bride. My daughter. The woman's expression softened with pity. "I'm sure it's correct, but I'll radio the wedding planner if you'd like." She stepped away, speaking quietly into her headset while I stood there, clutching my small purse, feeling more out of place than I had at the engagement party. The wedding planner, a severe-looking woman in all black, approached me with an expression that suggested I was creating an unnecessary problem. "Mrs. Anderson, is there an issue?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I think there's been a mistake with the seating. I'm Sarah's mother, and I'm seated in the back." She glanced at her tablet. "That's where the bride requested you to be seated. behind the sterling family members and the VIP guests. VIP guests. As if the mother who'd raised the bride wasn't a VIP, as if I was just another random attendee. But traditional wedding etiquette, the mother of the bride sits in the front row, or at least the second row. The wedding planner's expression remained professionally neutral. The bride made specific requests for the seating arrangements. If you'd like to discuss it with her, she's in the bridal suite, but I really don't recommend disturbing her right now. She's having her final photos taken. I walked to my assigned seat in silence, passing rows and rows of people I didn't know. Marcus's parents sat in the front row, looking regal. His siblings and their families occupied the second and third rows. Business associates and friends filled the next several rows. And there I was, in row 12, seated between Marcus's third cousin and a business partner from his hotel chain. Neither acknowledged me. I sat down carefully, smoothing my dress, trying to maintain my composure even though tears were threatening to spill. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked absolutely stunning in her wedding gown, a masterpiece of lace and silk that probably cost more than I'd earned in 2 years. But I could barely see her from where I sat. Taller guests blocked my view. I had to lean sideways and crane my neck just to catch glimpses of my daughter walking down the aisle. I couldn't see her face clearly when she said her vows. I couldn't capture this moment in my memory the way a mother should. Couldn't see the expression in her eyes when she married the man she loved. During the reception, things got worse. When the speeches began, Marcus's father gave a long, heartfelt toast, welcoming Sarah into their family. Then Marcus's mother spoke, tears streaming down her face, about how Sarah was finally getting the family she deserved, and how they were honored to give her the support and love she'd always needed. Those words hit me like physical blows. Finally, always needed? What did that mean? I'd given Sarah everything I had. I'd been her family, her support, her love for her entire life. Then Sarah stood to give her speech. My heart lifted slightly. Surely she would acknowledge me now, would thank me for everything I'd sacrificed. She spoke beautifully about finding love, about gratitude, about new beginnings. I want to thank Marcus's parents, Helen and Richard, for welcoming me with open arms and finally giving me the family I always dreamed of having. You've shown me what true family support looks like, and I'm forever grateful. The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen, her words echoing in my head. Finally giving her the family she always dreamed of? Wasn't I her family? Hadn't I been enough? She continued thanking various people, Marcus's siblings, the wedding planner, her colleagues, even Marcus's childhood nanny. My name was never mentioned. Not once. I waited through the entire speech, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white, hoping she'd look in my direction, would say something, anything, to acknowledge that I existed. But she never did. After the formal speeches, I gathered my courage and approached her. She was surrounded by well-wishers, laughing and glowing in her beautiful dress. "Sarah, sweetheart," I said softly, touching her arm. She turned, and for just a moment I saw something flash across her face. Annoyance? Embarrassment? She quickly masked it with a tight smile. "Oh, Mom. Hi." She kissed my cheek quickly, perfunctorily, like you'd greet a distant aunt. "You look beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you." After the wedding, the visits stopped completely. Not gradually, not with apologetic explanations. They just ended. My Sunday mornings became empty rituals of waiting for a daughter who never came. I'd call and reach voicemail. I'd text and get one-word responses days later. Busy or sorry or just a thumbs-up emoji. 2 months passed, then 4, then 6. Each week I told myself next Sunday would be different, but it never was. By the 7th month, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to surprise her. I baked her favorite apple pie from scratch, the recipe I'd perfected over 20 years, and took 2 buses across town to her new home, a mansion in the wealthy suburbs with iron gates and manicured hedges. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell, clutching the still warm pie. A uniformed housekeeper answered, looking me up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Can I help you?" she asked coolly. "I'm here to see my daughter, Sarah Sterling," I said, trying to sound confident. The woman's eyebrows raised slightly. "Is Mrs. Sterling expecting you?" "Expecting me?" I was her mother. "No, it's a surprise. I brought her favorite pie." The housekeeper's expression remained unchanged. "Mrs. Sterling is hosting a dinner party this evening. I'll need to check if you're on the guest list." Guest list? To see my own daughter? Before I could respond, I heard laughter from inside. Sophisticated voices, clinking glasses, classical music playing softly. Through the open door, I could see into the grand living room. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Well-dressed people held wine glasses, chatting in small groups. And there was Sarah, wearing an elegant black dress I'd never seen, her hair styled perfectly, laughing at something a distinguished-looking man was saying. She looked like she belonged in a magazine. She looked like a stranger. "Sarah," I called out, my voice breaking slightly. "Sweetie, it's Mom." The laughter stopped abruptly. Every head turned toward the door. Sarah's face drained of color. For a moment, we just stared at each other across that vast, expensive space, a distance that felt like miles instead of feet. Then she moved, quickly, purposefully, toward the door. She stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind her, shutting me out, shutting them in. "Mother," she said, her voice tight and controlled. "What are you doing here?" Not Mom, not "it's so good to see you," just "Mother," spoken like a formality. I missed you," I stammered, suddenly feeling foolish standing there with my homemade pie. "You haven't returned my calls, and I thought—" "You can't just show up unannounced like this," she interrupted, glancing nervously back at the closed door. "These are Marcus's important clients, business associates. They don't know about—" She stopped abruptly, but the damage was done. "Don't know about what?" I whispered, my heart hammering in my chest. She took a breath, and when she spoke, her words were carefully chosen, deliberately cruel. "Mom, my life is different now. Marcus's family has certain expectations, standards. Having a mother who used to clean toilets for a living isn't exactly the image we're projecting to his business partners." The pie slipped from my hands. The months that followed Sarah's rejection were the loneliest of my life, but they also forced me to open my eyes to truths I'd been avoiding. I stopped making excuses for her. I stopped pretending everything would magically fix itself. Instead, I started paying attention to details I'd previously overlooked, and what I discovered shattered what remained of my heart. It began with a casual comment Sarah made during one of our rare awkward phone calls. "We're finally getting the trust fund released next month, so we can renovate the east wing of the house," she mentioned casually, as if discussing the weather. I froze. "Trust fund? What trust fund?" There was a pause. "The one you set up for me, obviously. We're using it for the renovations and Marcus's hotel expansion." But I'd never set up a trust fund. I barely had savings, let alone money to put in trust. Confused and worried, I spent the next week digging through old boxes in my closet, searching for financial documents I hadn't looked at in years. That's when I found it. Paperwork from 25 years ago, from when Sarah's father died. There had been a life insurance policy I'd forgotten about, plus a settlement from the construction company after the accident. The lawyer had advised me to put it all in Sarah's name for tax purposes and future college expenses. It totaled approximately $150,000, a fortune to me at the time, money I'd earmarked entirely for her education and future. My hands shaking, I called the bank where the account had been held. After navigating through security questions and automated menus, a representative finally pulled up the records. "That account was closed 2 years ago, ma'am," she informed me. 2 years ago, right around the time Sarah met Marcus. "Can you tell me what happened to the funds?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They were transferred to a joint account under Sarah Anderson and Marcus Sterling. The full balance of $147,812. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. She'd taken every penny, money her father had died to provide, without ever mentioning it to me. But why would she need to hide it? Why claim it was a trust fund as if it were some separate inheritance? Then it clicked. She was using that money to appear wealthier than she was, to fit into Marcus's world, to seem like she came from money instead of poverty. Desperate to understand the full scope of what was happening, I did something I'd never done before. I searched for Sarah online. What I found made me physically ill. There were society pages featuring her and Marcus at charity galas, magazine interviews where she discussed her rise to success. But in every article, every interview, every public appearance, her history had been rewritten. One article described her as overcoming adversity after being raised in the foster system. Foster system? Another mentioned her estranged family situation and praised her for building a life despite having no parental support. I printed every article, my hands trembling as the pages emerged from the library printer. She hadn't just abandoned me, she'd erased me completely from her narrative. I stopped eating. Food tasted like ash in my mouth, and my appetite disappeared entirely. Within 3 weeks, I'd lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. My clothes hung loose on my frame, and dark circles appeared under my eyes from sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling. I stopped going to church, couldn't face the concerned questions from people who'd watched Sarah grow up. I stopped volunteering at the shelter. I stopped tending my balcony garden. The tomato plants withered and died while I sat motionless at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. She always noticed. One Tuesday afternoon, she knocked on my door, and when I didn't answer, she used the spare key I'd given her years ago for emergencies. She found me sitting in the dark, still in my nightgown at 3 in the afternoon, surrounded by photographs of Sarah spread across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. "Margaret," she gasped, rushing to my side. "What's happened? Are you sick?" That's when I broke completely. 25 years of strength, of holding everything together, of being the rock everyone leaned on. It all shattered in an instant. I collapsed into Mrs. Chen's arms and sobbed so hard my entire body shook. "I gave her everything," I cried, the words tumbling out between gasping breaths. Everything, and it still wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. The memories came in waves, drowning me. Sarah at 6 years old, holding my hand and looking up at me with complete trust in her eyes, saying, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house and we'll never be apart." I'd laughed and kissed her forehead, telling her I didn't need a big house. I just needed her. Sarah at 16, sobbing in my arms after her first serious heartbreak, saying, "You're the only person who will never leave me, Mom. Everyone else disappoints me, but never you." I'd stroked her hair and promised I'd always be there, never imagining she'd be the one to leave. Sarah at her college graduation, wrapping her arms around me so tight I could barely breathe, whispering, "I owe you everything. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished. It's because of you. I'll take care of you forever, Mom, I promise." I'd cried tears of joy that day, so proud, so grateful, believing every word, all lies. Or had they been true then? Had that girl, my girl, actually existed? Or had I imagined the depth of her love? I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 70 years old, silver hair uncombed, face gaunt and aged beyond my years, eyes that had once sparkled with purpose, now hollow and defeated. These hands had worked themselves raw to give her opportunities. These arms had held her through every nightmare, every fear, every triumph. This heart had beaten for her before she was even born. What did I do wrong? I whispered to my reflection. Where did I fail her? Mrs. Chen, standing behind me, squeezed my shoulders gently. You didn't fail anyone, Margaret. Sometimes people forget where they came from. Sometimes they choose ambition over love. That's not your fault, but it felt like my fault. I woke up on a Thursday morning, and something inside me had fundamentally changed. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting pale orange light across my bedroom ceiling. I'd been lying awake for hours, as I had every night, for weeks, but this time felt different. My tears had dried up. The crushing weight on my chest had transformed into something else entirely. Something harder, sharper, more focused. It was anger. Pure, righteous anger. I sat up in bed and looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman staring back at me looked defeated, broken, like a ghost of who she used to be. But as I studied that face, lined with age and grief, I saw something else beneath the pain. I saw a survivor. I saw the woman who'd buried her husband at 35 and kept going. The woman who'd worked 2 jobs on 3 hours of sleep and never complained. The woman who'd built a life from nothing, who'd turned poverty into possibility through sheer force of will. "Who are you?" I asked my reflection out loud. The question hung in the quiet room. I'd spent 70 years defining myself through other people. I was someone's wife, then someone's widow. I was Sarah's mother, Sarah's provider, Sarah's cheerleader. But who was Margaret Anderson when you stripped away all those roles? Who was I at my core? I stood up slowly, my joints protesting, and walked to the window. The neighborhood was waking up. Mrs. Chen doing her morning stretches on her balcony, the couple in 3B loading their twins into the car, the mailman beginning his route. Life continued. The world kept spinning even when your heart was shattered. And I was still here, still breathing, still standing. That had to count for something. "No more," I said firmly to the sunrise. "No more being invisible. No more accepting this. No more letting her rewrite history and erase me like I never existed." My voice grew stronger with each word. I raised her. I sacrificed everything for her, and I will not let her pretend I'm dead while I'm still alive. For 70 years, I'd been taught that good mothers were selfless, that they gave without expecting anything in return, that they made themselves small so their children could grow big. I'd internalized that lesson so completely that I'd become invisible even to myself. But standing there in the morning light, I realized something crucial. There's a difference between selfless love and allowing yourself to be erased. There's a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Sarah wanted me gone from her life? Fine. But she wouldn't get to profit from my erasure without consequences. She wouldn't get to use her father's life insurance money he died to provide, to fund her fake image while telling the world she came from nothing. She wouldn't get to claim she was an orphan while her mother sat alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, grieving a daughter who was still alive. I made myself coffee. Real coffee. The good kind Sarah used to sneak into my grocery cart. I showered and dressed carefully. I braided my silver hair. I spent the next 3 weeks planning carefully, methodically, using the same discipline I'd once applied to budgeting, every dollar to ensure Sarah had what she needed. But this time, I was planning for myself. I started by visiting the legal aid clinic for seniors that Mrs. Chen had told me about. The waiting room was filled with elderly people like me, tired, overlooked, pushed aside by families who'd forgotten them. When my name was called, I met Rebecca Chen, no relation to my neighbor, but equally kind. She was a young attorney, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I spread my documents across her desk, the bank statements showing the withdrawn insurance money, the printed articles where Sarah claimed to be from foster care, the emails I'd found where she described me as estranged and difficult to Marcus's family, the wedding program that didn't mention my name. Rebecca studied everything in silence, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up at me. "Mrs. Anderson, your daughter accessed funds that were technically in her name, so legally that's complicated. But there's a clear pattern here of financial manipulation and elder exploitation, especially considering she misrepresented your relationship to benefit financially from her marriage. She essentially committed fraud by declaring you dead or estranged to access certain social advantages. She paused. More importantly, this is elder abuse, emotional abandonment with financial motivation. I'd like to take your case pro bono. I cried then, not from sadness but from relief. Someone believed me. Someone saw what had been done to me and called it what it was: abuse. Over the following days, I became a woman on a mission. I documented everything, every ignored text message, saved, every voicemail that went unreturned, backed up, every birthday and holiday that passed without acknowledgement, noted in a journal with dates and details. I contacted people from Sarah's childhood, her teachers, her friends' parents, our old neighbors. I collected testimony about the mother I'd been and the relationship we'd had. Mrs. Patterson, Sarah's third-grade teacher, remembered how I'd volunteered in the classroom despite working nights. Mr. Rodriguez from our old apartment building recalled how Sarah used to brag about her mom to anyone who'd listen. I gathered photographs spanning 25 years, pictures of us laughing together, hugging, celebrating. Birthday cards Sarah had written me with messages like, "You're my hero, Mom, and I don't know what I'd do without you." Report cards where teachers noted, "Sarah's mother is exceptionally devoted." Every piece of evidence painted the same picture. We'd been inseparable until money and social status got in the way. And then I made a bold decision. I used money from selling my mother's antique necklace, the only valuable thing I owned, to hire a private investigator. Within a week, he'd uncovered that Marcus's family had a pattern of this behavior. Marcus's own grandmother, Dorothy, had been abandoned in a state nursing home, forgotten, by the family she'd helped raise. The Sterlings encouraged their children to distance themselves from unsuitable family members who might damage their pristine social image. The investigator also discovered something crucial. Sarah and Marcus were about to close on a major property development deal. The week before my 70th birthday felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to jump. My small apartment transformed into a war room. Rebecca came by almost daily, bringing documents for me to review, strategies to discuss, contingencies to plan. We'd spread papers across my kitchen table, legal briefs, witness statements, financial records, building our case brick by brick. The elderly woman who'd once been too timid to ask for a discount at the grocery store was now preparing to go to war with her own daughter. Jennifer Martinez, the investigative reporter who specialized in elder abuse stories, had interviewed me 3 days earlier. She'd sat in my living room with her camera crew, recording as I told my story. Every sacrifice, every betrayal, every lie. Tears had streamed down my face as I spoke, but my voice never wavered. I just want people to know that when you abandon your parents, you're not just hurting them. You're erasing your own history, your own humanity, I'd said directly into the camera. The interview was scheduled to air the day after my birthday. Jennifer promised it would be powerful, that it would reach millions of viewers. Sarah's lawyer had called twice trying to negotiate. "Mrs. Anderson, my client is willing to offer a settlement of $50,000 in exchange for your signature on a non-disclosure agreement and a complete withdrawal of all claims." $50,000. Once upon a time, that would have seemed like a fortune, but I'd surprised myself with my response. "Tell your client that her mother isn't for sale, not anymore." The power in those words, the certainty, had felt intoxicating. Rebecca had arranged for the mediation to take place at the Legal Aid Center in a proper conference room. She'd prepared a presentation, a slideshow of my life with Sarah, contrasting the loving relationship we'd had with the cruel abandonment that followed. On one wall, she'd mounted a timeline showing exactly when Sarah's behavior changed, correlating it precisely with her relationship with Marcus and the withdrawal of the insurance funds. The morning of my birthday arrived cold and overcast, the sky matching my nervous anticipation. I dressed in the same outfit I'd worn to Sarah's college graduation, a navy blue dress that still fit, though looser now. Mrs. Chen hugged me tightly before I left. "You're the bravest woman I know, Margaret. Whatever happens today, you've already won by refusing to stay invisible." At the Legal Aid Center, my hands trembled as I walked down the hallway toward the conference room. Rebecca presented our case with devastating precision. The slideshow began. Photos of 5-year-old Sarah and me, my arms wrapped protectively around her after her father's funeral. Sarah at 10, hugging me tight at her school awards ceremony. Sarah at 18, graduation day, holding a sign that read, "I love you, Mom, my hero." Each image was accompanied by my recorded voice explaining the context. This was the day I worked a double shift so she could go on the field trip. This was the Christmas I wore the same coat for another year so she could have new boots. This was her graduation, the day she promised she'd take care of me forever. Sarah sat rigid in her chair, her face pale, refusing to meet my eyes. Marcus looked increasingly uncomfortable, checking his watch repeatedly. But when Rebecca presented the bank statements showing the insurance fund withdrawal, Marcus's expression shifted to confusion. "Sarah, you told me that was your trust fund from your grandparents," he said quietly. "It was technically my money," Sarah responded defensively. "It was in my name." Rebecca cut in sharply. "Money your father died to provide, that your mother carefully saved for your education, while she survived on minimum wage. Money you used to appear wealthier when courting Marcus's family." She clicked to the next slide. The articles where Sarah claimed to be from foster care. "And this? Declaring your living mother dead or non-existent." The room fell silent. Then Helen Sterling, Marcus's mother, stood abruptly. "Sarah, you told us your mother had abandoned you as a child, that you were raised in foster homes, that you'd built yourself from nothing with no family support." Her voice shook with barely controlled anger. "You told us you understood the importance of family because you'd never had one." Sarah's carefully constructed facade cracked. "I didn't. It wasn't exactly," she stammered. That's when Rebecca dropped the biggest revelation. Mrs. Anderson isn't the only parent who's been erased by this family. She opened the door and an elderly woman with a cane entered slowly. She was frail, probably in her mid-80s, with Marcus's same distinctive eyes. "Grandmother Dorothy?" Marcus whispered, his face draining of color. "Hello, Marcus," Dorothy said softly. "I've been in Riverside State Nursing Home for 4 years. You stopped visiting after the first month. Your parents told the staff I had no family." Helen gasped audibly. Marcus stood frozen. The pattern was undeniable. The Sterlings built their perfect image by erasing inconvenient family members. And Sarah had learned the playbook perfectly. The aftermath unfolded with stunning speed. Jennifer's news segment aired that evening at 6 o'clock. "Wealthy Family's Dark Secret, a Pattern of Elder Abandonment." The story featured my interview, the mediation room confrontation, and heartbreaking footage of Dorothy describing her years of abandonment. By midnight, it had been shared over 200,000 times on social media. By morning, it was national news. The Sterling Family Foundation, which had built its reputation on family values and charitable giving, faced immediate backlash. Major donors pulled their funding, demanding investigations into how a family that abandoned its own elderly members could claim to champion social causes. Marcus's business partners began distancing themselves, concerned about the reputational damage. The property development deal Sarah and Marcus had been cultivating collapsed when investors discovered the couple had built their self-made success story on lies and erased family histories. Marcus's parents, mortified by the public exposure and the revelation about Dorothy, acted swiftly. Helen personally apologized to me, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea Marcus had done that to his grandmother. I thought she'd chosen that facility and simply preferred limited visits. I'm horrified, and I'm so deeply sorry." Within days, they moved Dorothy into a luxury assisted living community and committed to weekly family visits. They also established a genuine elder care fund, not for publicity, but for accountability. Sarah's carefully constructed social media presence disappeared overnight. The glamorous photos, the inspirational captions about overcoming adversity, all deleted. She couldn't show her face at the country club or the charity galas where she'd once been celebrated. Her friends from Marcus's world quietly stopped calling. The invitations stopped coming. Marcus and Sarah's marriage began crumbling under the weight of exposed lies. I heard through Rebecca that they were in intensive couples therapy, though the trust between them had been irreparably damaged. Marcus felt betrayed. He'd married someone he thought he knew, only to discover she'd manipulated him as thoroughly as she'd erased me. Rebecca helped me file a civil lawsuit, not primarily for money, though financial acknowledgement of harm mattered, but for a legal public record of what had been done. 6 months later, we reached a settlement. Sarah signed a document formally acknowledging the emotional and financial harm she'd caused, agreeing to therapy, and committing to supervised reconciliation sessions if I chose to pursue them. The money from the settlement allowed me to move to a better apartment with 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for Dorothy, who'd become my closest friend. Looking back now, nearly a year after everything changed, I understand something I didn't before. That gift box that arrived on my 70th birthday, the one I mentioned at the beginning of this story, wasn't actually from Marcus. It was from Helen, Marcus's mother. After she'd learned the truth about Sarah's lies, she'd gone to my old apartment and found a photograph I'd kept framed on my nightstand. It showed Sarah and me when she was 7. Both of us covered in flour after baking cookies together, laughing so hard our eyes were squeezed shut. We looked genuinely, completely happy. Helen had that photo professionally enlarged and framed, then sent it with a simple note. "This is who you really are, Margaret. Don't let them erase you. You deserve to be seen." That photograph, that acknowledgement from a woman who barely knew me, gave me the courage to stop being invisible. It reminded me that my story mattered, that my life had value beyond what my daughter chose to recognize. This story isn't just about one daughter's betrayal or one mother's pain. It's about a truth we don't discuss enough in our society. Success built on shame is not real success. My daughter thought she could buy belonging by erasing her past, by pretending her working-class mother didn't exist. But you cannot build an authentic life on lies. You cannot find genuine happiness by abandoning the people who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. Family, real family, isn't something to be ashamed of, no matter how humble your beginnings. The people who loved you when you had nothing, who worked themselves to exhaustion to give you a future, who believed in you before the world knew your name. Those people are your foundation. When you erase them, you don't just hurt them. You lose yourself. Greed and social climbing can transform love into cruelty so gradually, you don't even notice it happening. My daughter didn't wake up one day deciding to be cruel. She made small compromises, each one seeming reasonable in the moment, until she'd traveled so far from who she was that she couldn't find her way back. But here's what I want you to remember most. Your worth is not determined by who acknowledges you. It's determined by who you are when no one is watching, by your integrity, your resilience, your refusal to let others define your value. I'm 70 years old. I live in a modest apartment with my friend Dorothy, 2 women who refuse to disappear quietly. We tend a small garden together,